Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Saturday is our last day, the long day, and we're going to, first 45 minutes actually, is going to be dedicated to general questions. Any questions you have around media or virtual production. The second hour is, it gets more complicated on Saturday, but the second hour and a half-ish, we talk about education. We don't put that on YouTube, so you have to tune in on Zoom. You can find out how to get there in officehours.global. So we're going to be talking about it. The second half of our education hour or hours will be, we're going to talk about Keynote. So we're going to do a little bit of showing how the new Keynote works with live video. It's kind of slick, so we're going to check that out. And then at 10 o'clock, we have Damyanti Gajjar back. We're going to learn how to make chai on Zoom together. So I'm pretty excited about that. So I went out shopping yesterday. I got some lemongrass. I'm ready. And so we're going to be doing that. And then at noon, we have the Belfast Method. So we'll be doing that. And that'll be in a separate link that went out earlier today. So that's what we have lined up. And now I'm going to hand it off to our host, Emily Russo.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. I'm pretty excited about today. Someone mentioned in the chat, I think it was A. Mitchell, said that there were a lot of industry things going on, conferences or big things going on this week. There were 3 different ones. So if anyone has any feedback on that, that would be interesting to know what went on and how it went and things like that. But let's go ahead and jump right into those questions.
First question is from Tim Holm in San Lorenzo, California. He says, what's the difference between passive and active DI boxes? Are there any specific circumstances to use either one?
Mitch?
Active versus passive. Generally, passive is using a transformer and no active electronic parts in it. Active may be some kind of balancing network in there electronically done. Application transformers are just wonderful things. They just do a great job of isolating one device from another. And if you have like hum problems, things like that, a transformer most likely is the quickest way to resolve that problem.
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I find that actually using passive is the way to go really quick. A lot of those boxes have like a minus 20 or minus 40 dB pad that you can put in and a ground lift. The active boxes have kind of the same thing, but they need to be powered. And then what happens with the active boxes that is an advantage, first of all, they're a little bit more expensive, but that's because they have good preamps in them typically, or at least a preamp that is doing more things than just a transformer does. So you can get a cleaner signal, but I know that you can also really get some noise in there too that's amplified if you have an active one and you have kind of a poor signal chain going into it.
Go ahead, Tom. I'm sorry. I jumped the gun. Anyway, I do that once every Saturday. Go ahead.
I think Tim covered about everything I wanted to add.
Cool.
All right. Next question.
Next question is from Hasmukh Gajjar from Cape Town. It said, ATEM reset. I have been told after Charles created the LUTS that my ATEM should not have any previous saved settings or any setting I restored before. How do I set the ATEM to achieve this?
Alex?
So you don't have to, you shouldn't have to reset the whole thing. It's just a matter of resetting the cameras. So after the LUTs are there, you don't have to reset the whole switcher. You just have to go through each camera setting. You just want to, there's a reset, settings for each camera. And that's just making sure that all your color is back to where it was for that camera, so that you shouldn't need to reset the whole mini. That would be more than was necessary and probably create a lot of work.
All right, next question.
Next question is from Michael Mader in Brisbane, Australia. He said, if you have a budget for an ATEM Mini Extreme ISO or an M1 Mac Mini, which way do you go?
Blue.
So I think this really depends on what equipment you already have, right? So if you have a Mac that is, if you're looking at a Mac, if you have a Mac that's, in my opinion, anything from 2015 on, and all you're trying to do is control the ATEM and you don't have an ATEM already, then I'd go with the ATEM Extreme. If you have like an ATEM Mini or an ATEM Mini Pro and you have a really old computer, then get a new Mac. It really depends on what you have already, but the Extreme's a really nice piece of gear.
Tim?
Yeah, I think the same thing. When I first got my ATEM, I actually bought the ATEM Mini Pro, and then 3 weeks later, the Extreme came out. So I was able to return it to B&H, get the Extreme, and I absolutely love it. So if you're just going into your computer with a webcam and your computer is kind of good enough, the Extreme will be great, and those Macs will still be around for a long time anyhow. And it really is a step up in your production level, especially um, even if you're just messing around with it at home, you learn a lot using it.
Jeffrey.
Just figure out a way to get both of them. So no, it's all really about how many cameras you have, how if you're going to be utilizing those super sources. With the Mac, if you're getting a Mac M1, then you got to figure out capture cards. You got to figure out how to do exactly what you're doing with the ATEM Mini Extreme ISO that you would do in the Mac Mini. So it would make more sense to go that route first, and then the Mac Mini second. Because as was said, you don't need to have the latest, greatest, most powerful if all it's doing is bringing in one video source to stream out. Now, if you're using it for more than that, then yeah, I would actually go with what I just said at the beginning. Figure out how to do both.
All right, next question.
Next question is from Vincent Alvarez in Bellingham. He said, why can't I plug my Pyle headset mic directly into the front of my desktop PC? What exactly does the TechRise USB dongle do?
Tim?
So there's just not enough gain in your microphone input level in a laptop. So the TechRise, what it does is it applies your 5 volts, which the Pyle needs, from my understanding, and then it also converts it to a digital signal, which you can then use as to select that device, that TechRise into your audio chain. So I think the biggest thing is that it just doesn't have enough gain to do it, into it.
All right, next question.
Next question is from Tim Holm in San Lorenzo, California. He said, our organization uses Eartec comms, which work just fine for us now. We have a set of 5. What is the next step to double that number? Should I just get 5 more with the same channels?
Blue?
Sure. If depends on which Eartec you're using, but if you're using the little ultralights, the base stations can handle up to, I believe, 8 if memory serves. So you can't quite double, but you can get a little bit more than that. We also recently added a Unity comm system to the Eartec. With Eartec sells a really cool little piece of it's a custom mini jack on both sides, and allowed us to connect our Unity comm system to 8 headsets, which worked really nicely.
Alex?
And I believe that there's a hub that goes up to 16. So I think that you can get, there's a new, the hub will take you to the next level of stuff that you just need that different transceiver to make that work.
And Alex, I know you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't use that. You'd use something else, but
I'd use whatever works. I mean, I think the Eartec ones are fairly cost effective, right?
Oh yeah, the 5 were like $1,100 or something like that.
That's great. Yeah, the headphones for the ClearComs are $300. So
yeah.
Don't even get a transmitter with that. You just get a headphone with a cable end. And do these work pretty well?
They really do actually. They're very clear. You flip the microphone down, and then you flip it back up, and that's what everybody does. And seems to work super intelligible. So I think for the price and for maybe low numbers like that, of course it's a single channel, so you're kind of stuck with that. So
right.
That might not be helpful in some situations.
Yeah, I think that a lot of those things are. It just depends on what you're using them for. If it works where you're at, it's the right thing to use. And I think that they're so cost effective that it's a really great place to start. I think that because they're so inexpensive, I don't even think you worry about whether they're scalable or not. If you get to a point where you need them to scale, then you get something else. But to what Blue said is that the Unity comms is another place to go with that. As far as but the Eartecs are all wireless, right?
Yeah, they're all wireless. You basically have one of the set that you turn on, and then that it talks to all the others. Basically it becomes
Yeah.
I think that sets the channel, I guess. I don't really know what it does.
Yeah, our smaller kits, and oftentimes what we use in the office is we use Studio Technologies has these belt packs that are Dante, and so they have Ethernets in them. They're not wireless, but they have Ethernet to them, and then we use Unity comms to tie into that, and then we use our mixer, and we just build mix minuses for it. The problem is you can't build that many, so you start running out of buses to do that. So that becomes a challenge, and we use that's where we use the kind of the 806, the BSS 806 to kind of manage all of those for us and how they integrate within that system. So,
all right, next question.
Next question is from Craig McFarland in Boston. Is there rough timing for Office Hours 2.0, or is it just ready when it's ready?
Alex.
It's coming not next week, but the week after. So it's not ready when it's ready. So there's a lot of work that's been going into it. So Andy's been building, everyone, Andy and Jonathan. So Liminal has been working on the Isadora patches that make all of the brain work. And so that's already been kind of in process for the last 6 weeks. And then the front end is going to be built in Universe, and we're going to have those guys on to talk about it a little bit. So the iPad app that actually runs the event will be sitting, the iPad interface anyway into the cloud will be Jonathan's producing in Universe. And then they're finishing that up. We're working on graphics next week. We expect to, the week, not this week, next week, but the week after will be one of those that is actually the most fun versions of Office Hours that we have, which is that it's open-ended. Like we're just going to break it. Like it's just, because Andy's going to be in the office, in my office, and or in our office, and Andy and Jonathan are going to be there hacking away at it and figuring out, we're going to start seeing all the super sources and all the stuff that looks like a show and everything else, but it'll break the first Monday. I'm expecting it to break Monday, Tuesday, and possibly Wednesday. And then we're hoping that it'll start working on Thursday or Friday. And then, we expect the following week to be usable, but rough. And then, but by mid-November, we should have it running solidly, and then over between middle of November and the end of the year, the goal is to really tighten the whole thing up into a show. So that's kind of the timing. And for those of you listening who don't know what I'm talking about, we're basically taking what you now see as like a Zoom show, and we're going to turn it into something that looks like a TV show. And so it's going to have the lower thirds and the graphics and the super sources and all the bits and pieces. And so what we're building is what we've building in the back is there's a pile of hardware in an office at O&O that has all these interconnects and everything else. And then we have a brain that's kind of passing all the stuff back and forth. And so it's going to be kind of a much more designed look than what we've had in the past. And we think that it'll elevate how some people see it. Some people don't need that. They understand that we just have a great conversation. We've got great cameras, great audio, all that stuff. But I think it'll help for some other folks to see something that looks like a TV show. And we're going to keep scaling it. So it'll be maybe not right at first, but probably pretty close. So it'll be 4K at first, and then it'll also be HDR. So we're going to actually punch it to PQ or HDR10, and then we're working on doing it in surround. So it'll be 5.1 to start with, but where you'll hear that is stuff like when we eventually start building the sweepers. You'll hear the sweepers coming from the sides. So it should be kind of fun. So we're gonna kind of start pushing that outer envelope of quality as well as the great conversations we already have.
All right, cool. Looking forward to it. Next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. He said, Alex mentioned providing facilities for event attendees to charge their mobile devices. Could a mobile app be a third screen for media property like Mad in the Kitchen? I see an Mad in the Kitchen app being useful while cooking apart from the show, for example.
Alex?
That's actually what the mobile version of Mukana is designed for. It's designed actually to be what we call a second screen or second ear experience. And so the idea is that when you download the mobile version or not download, but go to that web page and you see that, it's designed so that you could watch your Apple TV or you could watch even a TV show and be talking to each other and asking questions and so on and so forth. So, and that's also why the streaming goes into the mobile app or the mobile version of Mukana is so that we could actually give you a second show that goes along with the main show. And the reason you do that is like a football game. Imagine having a football game, but having a different set of people that are commentating on it. You can listen to them talk about it and answer questions and be part of that conversation. So that's what it was designed for. So it's already there in a lot of ways. Now we may add more features to it, but right now that's why we built it.
Interesting. All right, next question.
Next question is from Craig McFarlane in Boston. He said, any differences in the 1 gig fiber service from AT&T and Verizon?
Alex?
The AT&T one is oversubscribed and was not built from the ground up to be a fiber network. They're adding fiber to it. So it is definitely not the same thing as what we see with Verizon. That said, it's still pretty fast, but I think that what you'll find is there'll be certain times of the day where the AT&T one is not keeping up. Generally, Verizon is, when you buy a 1 gig connection with Verizon, you're getting 1 gig or technically 800 to 900 megs a second. AT&T will fluctuate between the 900 megs. So the WoW and Flutter, we find that generally a 1 gig connection maxes out at about 939 megs a second. that's been our experience. But you'll see that an AT&T will fluctuate all the way down to 150, 200 megs a second for the consumer connection. Now, once you get into an SLA from a business connection, you'll often stay above 800 megs a second.
All right, next question.
Next question is from Craig McFarlane in Boston, and he asks, any suggestion for a simple and inexpensive teleprompter solution for a nonprofit pros?
Oh, I'm going to need to.
Non-media pros. Sorry,
non-media. Yeah. I'm going to have to pay attention. Mitch.
Yeah, prices on those can run the gamut, and they can be much more technically involved, but a good starting point is Glide Gear. They have very inexpensive ones that work from tablets to iPhones and Android phones all the way up to monitors and things. A couple of things to look out for on your way up the ladder to like a Prompter Pro or something, a higher end unit, is what do you want to do with it? And in my case, I'm shopping and I'm looking, and I looked at Glide Gear, I looked at ICANN, and I also looked at Prompter Pro. I'm kind of steering towards the Prompter Pro, but it's not the least expensive solution. But what I want to do with it is a little different than what I could get out of a Glide Gear, and that is I want to use it for making Zoom calls and being able to look right into the monitor. And that means it's got to be a 1080 monitor, not a 4:3 monitor, so without bands cut into it, and everything gets small. So entry level Glide Gear, if you want to get do a little more homework, I can, and then all the way up to the Prompter Pro.
Jeffrey?
So I actually built my own teleprompter back years ago, and this is the picture of it that's on my Facebook page. It's basically a cardboard box, and with the back part of the glass is all darkened out. Whether you can do cloth, you can just basically take a Sharpie if you want to and color in the box to really darken it up. The piece of the mirror glass is basically a piece of plexiglass that I cut out, and then I got some reflective film that worked with I can't remember the percentage that it would come through, but that made for a great mirror. And then the Dell monitor that's underneath it, the cool thing about that Dell monitor is you take out one screw and all of a sudden it can lay back about 90 degrees. So I had that sitting on a table, and then of course the camera going through. It's not going to be the best thing in the world, but if you're doing something like what I'm doing right here, where my camera is only a few feet away from me, it's perfect for something like that. And then I had my laptop that I could control the screen, because I was reading stuff rather than having through a spreadsheet. I could control through that, or you can do a clicker or something like that.
Blue?
Yeah, so this is a cheap, inexpensive little piece of gear, but the Padcaster Parrot teleprompter kit, it's like 70, 80 bucks, something along those lines, uses a phone. So not great at a distance, but one of the things I really like about it is if you're using a gimbal, you can still actually attach this thing to it and it'll still balance. So nice little piece of gear that sits on a shelf somewhere that we use once in a while, but that may be a nice starting point.
Alex? We can't hear you.
sorry. The one that we have a lot of is the ICANN. ICANN makes a 12-inch portable one where it folds up on top of the screen. Now it's about $800, $900, but it has a screen and it works fairly well. And what we like about it is it's easy to pack, relatively easy to pack, which has been a difficult thing for us. I've done a lot of what Jeffrey was talking about, which is we've built them. Now I don't try to silver the glass myself. Most major cities, there's somewhere that sells silvered glass. And so you have to decide whether you want 70-30 or 60-40, and then you can go online and decide which one you want. But then you lean all that glass has to do is be 45 degrees to your monitor. So you can do that we've done it with C-stands for some of the largest ones. I think the largest teleprompter I built is, I believe about 70 inches. So it was, or I mean, 75 inches. It was massive. And we carried that one into the White House. so anyway, which was not a good idea. But you can, it's just a matter of leaning that glass forward and getting the right angle. And then you're going to be able to actually look straight into someone's, if that's what you're looking for. And for teleprompter. The one thing to remember about teleprompters is the larger they get, it doesn't necessarily make it better for the person if you're actually reading text. So if you read text, you're going to need to keep it down the center no matter what. So a 24-inch teleprompter is really for a face-to-face Interrotron type, and what we call it Interrotron is not Errol Morris didn't invent it, but he did name it. so Errol Morris named it as the Interrotron, and that is when we're looking at each other directly through through the teleprompter. If you're doing that, the bigger the better. And if you're trying to show a screen, so we've used it for training, where we want to see the screen in front of us. That way, when I'm teaching you, my screen is right in front of me, and I'm looking right at you as I'm working, which is some people like. And then we've also built them we built them for a very large corporation that they wanted them to be able to roll them into an office and have them just lift up out of the thing with the teleprompter. And in those cases, we actually took a C920, and affixed it to the back of the monitor. Back of the glass, and then basically vacuum formed the back of the glass so that there's a little bump in the back and a little line that goes down, and that's the cameras inside of it to keep it kind of secure in there. So there's a lot of things you can do there, and those things are all just time and someone who knows how to do those things. But I think that deciding what you want, the monitor is the thing that really changes it, because you can at $100, $200, $150, $200, you can get something with glass. It's the monitor and being able to flip horizontal, flip vertical, those types of things in the monitor. And remember that you can also get an external thing like I don't know if I have one laying around here. Usually I have one within arm's reach, which is in the HX. The decimator will do all the flips that you need in the video if you need to have that.
Thank you. Took lots of notes.
You probably do. We probably, there's a second hour there of talking about teleprompters.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think a lot of us have a lot of different ones there, so we'll have to take a look at that. So if someone needs to put it in, I say these things like, oh, we should do a second hour about that. I won't remember. Just so you know, I don't remember. You'll have to put it in the second hour list in Discord. All right, there it is. Tom has that's the decimator, which is the ultimate Swiss Army knife at 1080p. I think I have 4 of them just out of reach of but that decimator is something that we used to, literally every person in our company in Pixel Core had one in their backpack. Like that was standard issue, because we knew that the bigger the project, the more people were there and the more decimators would be in someone's backpack. So anyway, they're very, very useful little boxes.
So can I ask a follow-up question to this?
Sure. Absolutely.
Like what use cases is the turning point for someone? So like for using a teleprompter, and I don't know if that makes sense, but like I do meetings face-to-face with people and no one's looking at me. Most of my clients aren't looking at me. They're looking down or up or whatever. And so if I want to look good, when do I make the switch? What is that?
As soon as you can, so it depends. Like I'm not using a teleprompter right now because I want a bigger one than I could afford at the moment. I'm just buying other things, but I'm probably going to put another teleprompter in the next couple weeks. It's just how hard you want to play. Now, what I do to make up for that, I'm looking just a little down, but my window, me and whoever I'm talking to, is right under the lens. So it sits right under the lens. So I'm pretty close to eye contact at the distance that I have. but I'm not happy with what I have right now. So I'm going to the teleprompter. So it's direct on. The bottom line is it's how hard do you want to play, I think is really the, the question. The better camera, better audio, that eye contact, those are all things. It's, when you see someone who's really, really good as a manager or as a leader or as a salesperson, they're taking into account all those little things. They're taking into account of how they stand and how they talk and how they interact with folks and how they dress. My father will tell you what kind of tie he wears for cross-examination is different than is different than his closing, which is different than his direct. Like they're paying attention to all these little, and literally has like a little napkin, the little napkin things you put in your, I don't know how to do that. I don't like suits anyway, but he has but he knows they're all those color codes and everything else mean something to him now, and so the way he sets down, evidence, means something to him as a lawyer now, and so when you're playing at that level, it's just a matter of how hard you want to play, and it is always going to give you an advantage, what people don't realize again is they won't notice it. They'll just feel it. And you have more authority in the meeting. People listen to you more quickly in the meeting. People take on your ideas faster in the meeting. So you just got to decide how many places do you want to notch that up so that you get to win all the time. And you win a lot more with and people would, I'm not saying that it's fair. I'm just saying that it's so. Is that when you look better, sound better, and are and are more on, you win more often, and it does, and it's just the way it is, and so and it's much more even now through cameras than it ever was in person. It's much more because all you need is good lighting, and I look 2 or 3 times better over camera than I do in person. so I prefer it. Go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we have Tony
Couple
next.
hands up. Yeah.
Sorry,
So
Alex.
I wanted to.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to
ask
say
Alex,
that,
what do you put in your teleprompter view?
When I put my teleprompter, I usually have the person I'm talking to, and then a lot of times I run my teleprompter through a switch. So now I can put things over top of it. So it's running through an ATEM mini, and so at that point, and before it used to run through ATEMs, so I can put like part of my screen or other things that are up there. All kinds of other returns can be up there if I need it. For the most part, it's just who I'm talking to. But if there's something that I'm showing them, then I'll screen share to that as well. So I continue to look at them. So
Tony.
I apologize. I've got a lot of things going on in my house, but what I wanted to show you guys is my setup real quick. So
we see it.
okay, so that's an iPhone, and you see the little orange sticky? That is my reminder to make sure that I'm looking at my iPhone as my primary camera. The reason why I'm showing you this is because when I first started conversation with Tony Mobley, it was not an issue so much about my eye contact when I was involved with starting the show.
Mm-hmm.
But since that time, each and every week, there is an escalation in terms of people saying to me, Tony, we don't see your eye contact, or you look like you're looking at one of your other screens. And so when Alex says it depends on how hard you want to play the game, in terms of how active you want to be as far as the prompter is, I am at the point where I'm going to have to figure out a teleprompter.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that the input from those who are watching you is valuable. And so I just wanted to share that.
The thing is that it is, again, the reason that I'm going back, I try to really make it not do a teleprompter because it does take up a lot more room in my office. And again, for what I want to get, I'm either going to have to spend a lot of time building it or I'm spend $2,000 buying it. the thing is that what I'm really noticing is just this fine detail of people respond to you more when you look like you're looking in their eyes. If you're ever in a meeting and everyone looks like this all the time, that's, or they're looking over your head like this all the time. How do you feel? And I think that when we talk about all these things and people talk about Zoom fatigue, it's bad audio. It's people not looking in your eyes. It's people, doing a lot of other things and having weird backgrounds and weird edges rolling around. And all those things are the things that I think create cognitive load and make it more tiring and make it people not want to do virtual events. And so I do think that the teleprompter makes a difference.
Jeffrey?
So I went from the teleprompter to a screen, and the main reason why, this is basically what I have for my setup. So I had the camera right there, and then of course everything happening on screen. That's the reason why I switched over to a screen behind the camera, is because I got a lot of stuff that's going through. When I was doing the teleprompter stuff, that the mock-up teleprompter that I made, it was basically reading from a script for a show. So I had everything as close as I could, and I could still read the lines. And yeah, you could probably see a little bit of movement if you looked really close into the lens. But then I wouldn't have to stare into that little black void as I tell everybody else that they must do when I'm recording them. So teleprompters, the biggest thing is if you need the real estate, then a teleprompter, you'll have to get a bigger one, and then that means that the camera has to be farther back so you can really see the screen and be able to zoom in on the on you as a subject, so you can so it doesn't look like you're looking all over the place at different pieces of your screen.
Yeah, I'd have to say that like my setup right now is pretty good. Like I have two 27-inch monitors next to each other. I have the camera in the center, and then I put the Zoom meeting in between, and I put myself behind the camera because I tend to look at myself to make sure I don't like look funny or whatever's going on. And then I'll pull one of you next to me if I'm talking to you. But when I have to go read off of the Mukana screens, like I have one on the left and one on the right, then I tend to catch myself doing this, looking for the next person or whatever. So when I watch it back, I see myself looking away. But the thing that blows my mind is working in corporate, going to these meetings 2 years in, and people are still bad video. Like someone literally turned their camera on the other day and then moved it to the top of their device, and it was pointing over their head. Like, and I'm just sitting there and I'm like, no one decided that this was a good topic for your downtime, like how to have an effective, and, one of the things I'm doing for them is teaching them to have effective presentations, like writing some stuff for them about that. And it's just like, you guys aren't even doing it. Like, and you want the rest of your team to do it, and you're not doing it. So like it's this fine line, because I can't say anything because they're the client, and it's a client meeting. It's not we do these weekly meetings, and I guess they just don't put value into this. Like, oh, it's no big deal. We're just talking about the PowerPoint you created or whatever. And it feels very weird that, 2 years in, this is still a thing. Mitch?
Oh, good, Mitch.
Oh, it's all right, Alex. Go ahead. I can wait.
I'm just something I was thinking about over this week in a variety of different places, that we talk about the emperor has no clothes. And what I have really been struck by is how many places that occurs. Like there are so many places that emperor has no clothes occurs. We think of it as like the leader doesn't understand what we're hearing, but it happens all the time with everyone, where there are things like, so for instance, we can't, we've talked about it here probably more bluntly than most, of, hey, if you're working on a production team and you show up at an event and you're not appropriate, the emperor has no clothes. No one's going to tell you that you're being inappropriate. That's the problem. They're just not going to hire you again. Like they're not going to call you again. If you show up late, they're not going to say anything. They say, okay, we'll just work on it. Like let's just get to work. They're not going to hire you again. Like you're done. But that is the emperor has no clothes in that sense. Whereas in corporate, there's a lot of stuff going on right now about people getting fired from big corporate things by leaking. I'm like, like anybody who's worked in corporate that understands corporate is like, yeah, you got fired because you did that. Like that is the obvious, that is the obvious solution. And so the thing is but no one tells, it feels like no one tells you those things that, and like the other thing we talk a lot about with developers is, or people who are doing events, they'll say, well, no one's complaining. Okay, well, no one's complaining, but are they watching less? Are they signing up for the next one? Are they thinking that this is the thing that I have to do? Are they talking to their friends about it? All those things are the things that you're not tracking. So I would say the emperor has no clothes is the things that you're not actively tracking or you're not conscious to, but they're still affecting everything, and so I think that, and for us, for those of us who light well and look, well lit with a good camera and a good microphone, it's like getting into a race where everyone's decided they're going to walk. Like all you have to do is just start running. And they're like, why are they so far ahead? I don't understand. While they just keep walking. So like this thing that they're doing, they're moving their legs faster. That can't be useful, but they're so far ahead. How did they do that?
So true, Mitchell.
That was a hard one to top. Philosophically and literally, I think Alex brings good knowledge to this because every single time I come to this group, I learn something else. And, you can go from the idea that a teleprompter is going to fix all of your eye contact problems, and it isn't necessarily going to do that. It's all a matter of application and knowledge and experience that comes together that allows you to see that. But the story of your father, Alex, with the ties and the handkerchiefs is very apropos because there's many, many subtleties in the body language as we learn to use Zoom and as it becomes a viable way of communicating with groups of people socially. It's very important. So yes, second hour teleprompter.
There we go.
Craig?
Yeah, we should definitely do that.
Sorry, Craig.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just going to add on that throughout the any given week, there's so much, the whole Zoom fatigue thing, but I see all the time people struggling and showing top of their heads and all of that. And I've struggled actually more with helping others without trying to critique them or, they just throw up their hands and say, I don't want to have to deal with all that techie stuff. And, but they need it. And so understanding some of the subtleties of, well, they'll pay attention to you more if you can look in the camera and trying to get across all these lessons learned from people that do it all the time. I think we've gone a long way from the original, like 2 years ago, where people were with turning on their camera and doing Zoom meetings. We're a lot better at it now generally, but there's sort of an extra step to go.
Yeah, my supervisor said something the other day. He's like, "You always look good and sound good," and I was like, like I was like, I can show you how if you want, but like it gets to this weird point where it's like I want to just be like, can we have a seminar like internally and talk about this real quick because it varies so much. There's only 25 people in the company, 26 people, and it's just like the variation is so great, and we just have to tweak some things, like little small things, and it make us all look better. Alex.
It is. The question is it a seminar or is it an intervention? it's for that. But the thing is that when people say, "Oh, I don't want to deal with the tech," I hate wearing suits. Just in case you're wondering. Like I grew up wearing them. My father's a lawyer, and I went to a lot of things, and I had to dress. I'm good at it, but I hate suits. My natural state is like a cut off cargo shorts with sandals sometimes, and that and that's about as dressed up as I like to be. And when I need to get into a suit, you know what I do? I get a nice suit. I have a bunch of suits. I have a tux. I have all the things that I need when I need to do those things. And my wife always goes, "You really clean up well. You should do this more often." I'm like, I'm not going to do it more often. So anyway, but the thing is that I think people need to get. The people who succeed at a lot of these things are the people who put their, decide to do what they need to do to be successful, not like the way that the comfort level that they want it to be. It's what does the nature of the conversation require.
All right. All good points. Next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. It seems tools like Isadora that have come out of the academic arts community are not designed for full fault tolerance in mind. With productions like Office Hours 2.0 built around those tools, how do you create a backup strategy?
Alex.
So a lot of what we're going to be able to do, number one, is when we start, there won't be. Like literally, it may break with all of us to do it. And this is something we didn't talk about with redundancy a lot yesterday, which is that a lot of times when you're first starting, you don't try to figure out the redundancy until you figured it out. Then you start adding the redundancy back in. I do think that we'll be able to send commands because the problem, it takes too long to figure out the redundancy. So when you're ideating, you're figuring things out. It's just figure it out, and figure it out. And then once you get it working, now we start backfilling, security back into it. Our backup for it is we can always go back to Zoom. We can always keep doing this. Every day we can still produce an event, which is that we can still produce this thing. We figured out how to do that. So that's our backup. But our primary, eventually what will happen is that the universe commands and the universe interface, what we'll do is we'll split it so that we have two Isadoras that could theoretically take over if one went down for some reason. And then eventually if we start having enough people watching and we put in two hardware systems that would do it. So there's definitely ways for us to, increase that redundancy, but we won't do it until we have it really working. And we have the reason. Again, I've talked about it in the past. Risk equals the chances of something going wrong multiplied by the consequences. And so when the consequences get high enough, then we have to lower those chances of something going wrong. But we don't have to do that just yet.
Okay. Next question.
Next question is from Tim Holm in San Lorenzo, California. It said, in a hybrid situation, what are some fun ways for an in-person host to engage the digital audience more frequently? Any fun icebreaker memories or suggestions?
Blue?
Is it wrong to say don't do a hybrid event as a starting point? I haven't been here in a while, so I'm just curious if that's okay.
We're still there.
Okay, cool. Okay, so the biggest thing that I think you have to remember in hybrid, having done a few of these, mostly unsuccessfully, just because it's really hard to do, if not impossible, is the host just needs to engage with them. And whatever they're doing with the in-person audience, you need to find a way to do the exact same thing with the virtual audience, or the virtual audience is going to feel like a voyeur, right? Like they're not actually taking part in the event. They're just kind of watching it from a distance. So it's as simple as that, believe it or not, but the problem is it's as simple as that and it's ultimately complicated as that.
Alex?
Some of the ways I'm in the same boat where I've probably done, 400 or 500 hybrid events in the last decade, and none of them have really worked for the online audience. They feel fine for the in-room audience. They're like, oh, that was great. And the online audience is like, well, that was boring. And so some of the things that we've done that have been a little bit better is, number one, is our Q&A system, like Mokana, spans both of them. So both of them open up so if you're in the room, you open up the mobile version. If you're at home, you open up that. So everyone's asking the same questions and voting on the questions together so that they're all in the same question space. The other thing we do is if we do Q&A, we then move it all to taking those questions from that Q&A system rather than taking questions from people in the room, because then what it does is if we have just a handful of people on video or Zoom or Hangouts or whatever, every question is done over video. We do one in the room, then one online, then one in the room, and then one online. But we do it back and forth. Now, the other side effect of that, the camera work in the room will be way better if you only use one mic, because the camera operators always know where you're going. So the thing is, you take the mic to each person because you're asking the question for the online person at the same time. So those are some things that can sometimes make it the logistics a little easier, as well as pulls people in.
Jeffrey?
So the one thing to keep in mind is also what type of event it is, because you might not be wanting to do something fun if it's something more serious of a topic, and be able to interact back and forth with those two might be talking with the HR manager, talking with some of the other people that if you can go back and forth between the two. Now, with that said, there's a lot of awesome things that we can do nowadays that we weren't able to do in previous sessions. Like for instance, they could actually build an interface that everything comes from a web page, second screen experience, kind of like Makana, where you could ask, you could do a fun little trivia type thing, and then everybody enters it into their phones, their tablets, or whatever, their computers, and then you can give out answers, you can score them and things like that. Just have a full second screen experience where everybody can get involved because everybody's got a second screen with them, and little things like that. And I know there's a couple companies out there that have some really interactive stuff, so you don't have to build something out if you don't need to.
Mitch?
What Jeffrey said, it depends on the subject matter, and I say make sure the host is up to the task, because if they're not, they can't pull it off. And if you know that it does work, then that's fine. But a good analogy would be what happened on TV shows that had a studio audience and us as the audience watching on our TVs. People like Bill Maher, who had to work by himself without a studio audience, and see how he made that transition. He did it okay, but that is the pure power of the host being able to manage that. On the other hand, who I love the guy to death, but he did not do a good job. John Oliver on the same network went into a small isolated room, and when he started out, he was really stumbling because he didn't have the balance of the audience in the room to buoy him up. There's a lot of stand-up comedians depend on that audience response in order to gauge their timing, and timing is everything in comedy. So it depends on the venue, it depends on the subject matter, and it really depends on the host's ability to manage it.
Tim?
Yeah, the reason I asked that question is it's an ongoing situation. We're a house of worship, so it isn't really like they're willing to do two things at once, basically, where you would have an online or whatever live at the same time. So it is that difficult situation of trying to train people that are up front to also remember that about 40% of the people that used to come are still watching on a screen. And, basically I've even put pieces of tape on the floor that said this section, with a T that they can walk to and look at a camera and say, this section, contains X amount of people, so don't forget about these people. And, trying little things like that and just a constant conversation. But Alex, to your point, it's true. Once the live audience is in front of them, the laugh over here or the, affirmation over there, the in person crowd is going to win, unless it's favored, unless someone's just strategically really working on the hybrid or the digital side of it.
Blue?
Yeah, to that point, Tim, some of the things that we've done is actually make sure that the virtual audience is visible to the host. If it's a large room and you have delay screens that are hung, the backside of the delay screens actually shows Zoom galleries so that they're reminded that they're there. Extra confidence monitors in front of the stages or DSMs that show the Zoom galleries in addition to their slides. Also integrating the Zoom galleries or strips of galleries into the screens that the audience can see as well. So both the audience and the host is reminded that they're not alone. So those are some of the things that have helped, although still really, really difficult to pull off effectively.
Alex?
Yeah, one of the things that we've done actually with some house of worship activations that we worked on is, number one, is to create an online discussion that happens after the main event. So basically the pastor comes out of that and goes immediately. The first thing that they do, rather than going out and shaking hands with parishioners, the first thing they do is spend a half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour talking with the online parishioners so that they have their own time. And what happens is that having access to that creates active listening during the event, because they now have a place to put those. When they don't have a shelf to put questions on, they don't listen anymore. So it gives them a place that they're going to be able to go with that idea. The second one is for one of the larger churches that we did some consulting with. They actually created this is really getting aggressive, because this is like as people started coming back, they already had 3 they did the sermon 3 times on Sunday. So there's the early morning, late morning, and evening session, and they put another one in that was the virtual session. So they didn't bother to stream the other ones. They literally just had the virtual session, which was 100%, and they had screens up, drop screens into the, roll them in, these 70-inch monitors. I think it was like 3 or 4 monitors that they had in there with lots of Zoom participants, and then they just do the exact same sermon for the online audience, and that one's just for them. And then they interact, then they interact with them and so on and so forth. That by far is the most successful, and so that they're doing the sermon again anyway, and so that they might as well just do it again for just the online audience. And to be honest with you, the camera work gets a lot better real fast because there's nobody in the way. And so all the cameras pull in, they didn't have to, the cameras aren't set up somewhere else because they're not streaming the other ones. They just roll the cameras in. The cameras are really close. There's close-ups of the choir. There's close-ups of the, all the things that look amazing. So suddenly it's an amazing show, not like the back of the room. And so that was by far the most successful. The biggest challenge was more people stopped coming. So the thing is when they turned up that quality, they started and the reality is that that one, they stopped doing it every week because they were afraid that they were going to lose all of the they weren't going to have critical mass. Literally, they weren't going to have critical mass. So because so many people, when you increase the quality for the parishioners to that level, they just started going, I can just watch this at home. This is great. And they just weren't coming in. So that's the other challenge that you have.
And Alex, in that situation, would you suggest going with basically a Zoom setup, or, we're basically
that one was over Zoom. So it was the advantage of Zoom in that sense is that you get to see people. If they choose to turn their camera on, they didn't have to turn their camera on, but if they choose to turn their camera on, then it gives the pastor somewhere to look. So it gives them someone to interact with. It changes how they interact.
Yeah, we're using Vimeo, so it's basically a one-way.
That doesn't
with the chat.
I wouldn't do that.
Yeah,
I would strongly suggest Zoom, and then encourage parishioners to turn their cameras on. Because it makes a difference for the quality of what they're getting. And in this case, it was, over 1,000 people watching. So you didn't need that many. You needed, 1% or 10% or 15% to turn their cameras on, and it filled all the screens. so it was, it was the screens that they had, because they could only put 200 people up, in the screens. And so you don't need that many people to turn it on, depending on the viewership, and you just get less monitors. But the point is that it makes a big difference. I will say I couldn't do office hours if I didn't see people. Like if I didn't see the panelists. I used to do this thing before office hours called Ask Alex, which was just me answering questions on YouTube live, like on Hangouts, and I would just stream it. Not the same. Like I did. I did it every once in a while, and I was like, well, that's too much, and so it's super important to see the audience, in my opinion, and interact with them. So I think I do think that that's a valuable part of the puzzle.
Absolutely. That's why Clubhouse didn't work for us, at least not for me, because I just couldn't get used to not seeing people or getting feedback from the audience.
I think that one of the things that I would say about Clubhouse is that I feel like their lack of ability to manage Q&A is just the death knell of that, because it was so many uncomfortable pauses or people stepping over each other. And then they created weird ways of doing it, but that's all people creating weird ways of doing it rather than just having a tool that makes it work. And so and like this show is completely different because we have tools. For the panelists, we have tools for the audience, we have tools to manage that process that tightens it, and that's what I think, especially Clubhouse, where there's no visuals, doesn't work without that.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, office hours works on the mobile version as a podcast. Like I've walked and listened to you guys, and sometimes, I don't see whatever you're putting up on the screen or whatever, but usually describe it in some way, shape or form. And then it carries on and over so that it works as a podcast. So it can work in multiple places, but they're like Clubhouse, like you said, it was just lots of awkward weirdness. Blue?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with regards to Clubhouse, we've seen some hosts use it effectively as an after hours, like kind of where the in-person audience goes to the bar and networks there. Just kind of have an open room with some, wild Q&A, because it is completely impossible to manage without being incredibly rude. And that that can work, but it's a stretch.
All right. Alex, did you want
to?
I
was going to say it just doesn't produce something you want to do every day. Right. That's the thing. It just produces this. It's something you pull off, but I mean, and they could. I think that the idea of audio only was really exciting. I jumped into it. I bought some hardware to tie into Clubhouse. I was like, this is going to be the future, and then did a couple of them, and I found it to be soul sucking. And it just was like, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
So, and I gave it a good try, a couple of weeks. I mean, I don't know, I gave it like 6 weeks of doing Clubhouses and jumping on other people's Clubhouses and doing our own Clubhouses and doing a whole bunch of things. Cause I jump onto all those things to see how they work. And then I was just like, no, this is not going anywhere.
Yep. Exactly. All right. Well, we did it. We made it to the end of the first hour, went over a little bit. Which was shocking because I was really scared at one point of like, oh, what are we going to talk about?
When you talk about teleprompters for 20 minutes, we almost did a second hour in the first hour. So,
yeah, but that was good though, because I needed that. And to understand it a little deeper is nice. But anyway, our educators should be raising their hands, getting ready to come on, and we'll just wrap up.
And why don't we'll bring them on. We'll do a mic check. Why don't we plan on 8:15? We'll get